Long ago, in the heart of the savannah, where baobab trees whispered secrets to the wind, there lay a village called Aroko. This village was ruled by a wise and just king, Oba Ajenifuja, who believed that true wealth was not measured by gold, but by the heart. In this same village lived a beggar named Uluma. He wore rags stitched with torn threads and walked barefoot, his feet hardened by years of wandering. Uluma had no family, no cattle, and no land. He lived on morsels thrown to him by villagers, some kind, many cruel. But he had one thing that set him apart: a voice like a flute, and stories as ancient as the stars. Each evening, by the dying embers of the market fire, children would gather around Uluma to hear tales of talking animals, brave spirits, and trickster hares. He told the stories not for coins, but because he believed a story could feed the soul more than a feast. Now, in that same village lived Chief Baroka, a man of great wealth and swollen pride. He wore robes embroidered with lion claws and walked with a staff made of ivory. Yet his heart was dry, and his tongue sharper than a crocodile's tooth. He despised Uluma, mocking him in public. Even the vultures avoided that one. What use is a man who only speaks riddles and dirt? One Harmattan season, the king announced a test. Whosoever brings me the calabash of truth shall be honored with riches and a seat beside me in council. The calabash of truth was no ordinary gourd. It was said to reveal the soul of a man when he looked inside. Many scoffed, thinking it a myth, including Chief Baroka, who dismissed the quest with a wave of his jeweled hand. But Uluma, guided by an old tale whispered to him in dreams by a talking tortoise, set out into the forest. For 7 days and 7 nights, he walked through thick vines, drank from sacred springs, and listened to the wind. On the 8th day, he found it, deep inside the cave of Nneka, the wise, a spirit who tested him with 3 riddles, with humility and wisdom. Uluma answered each one. Uluma answered each one. He returned to Aroko with the calabash covered in red cloth. At the palace, the entire village gathered. Uluma stepped forward, trembling, his body weak, but his eyes shining like morning dew. King Ajenifuja stood and declared, "Let the calabash of truth reveal the soul of the bearer." Uluma lifted the red cloths. The calabash shimmered, and images formed inside. A baby bird being fed by its mother, a child sharing his yam, and an old man giving his only blanket to a stranger. The crowd gasped, seeing the purity of Uluma's spirit. Then Chief Baroka, scoffing, grabbed the calabash. "Let us see what it says of me, a true son of the soil." But as he peered in, the gourd turned dark. Thunder clapped. Smoke swirled. Images of greed, hoarded food, and a boy being whipped flashed. The people murmured. Children hid behind their mothers. Shamed, Chief Baroka dropped the calabash and fled. King Ajenifuja stood, his voice like rolling drums. "Let it be known from this day that a man is not judged by wealth or titles, but by the truth of his spirit." He turned to Uluma. "We shall be called Uluma the Wise, keeper of stories and truth bearer of Aroko." From that day, Uluma sat beside the king, wrapped not in rags but in honor. The children still gathered to hear his tales, and even the wind paused to listen. And so, in Aroko, the poor man rose, the proud man fell, and the calabash of truth never lied. Though Uluma the Wise now sat in the king's council, he remained as humble as the river that flows quietly but feeds the land. He wore a simple robe of woven cotton and still walked among the people, greeting children by name and listening to the woes of the elders. Yet, Chief Baroka's shame did not turn his heart to repentance. No, his pride, like a termite reading Iroko, cracked deeper with each passing moon. Hidden in the compound of 7 gates, he plotted in bitterness. How can a ragged beggar rise, while I, son of warriors, am shamed before my people? He hissed. One night, under the cover of the new moon, Baroka crept into the forest to seek the witch, Babairu, the last of the shadow binders. Babairu lived beneath the whispering tree, a tree so old that it remembered the first footsteps of man. Its bark was marked with glyphs that glowed under moonlight, and its leaves sang forgotten names. Baroka knelt and said, "Give me power to undo Uluma, and I shall reward you with gold and land." Babairu's eyes glowed like hot embers. He spoke, his voice like wind rustling through bones. To harm the truth bearer is to shake the sky. But if you insist, take this powder. Sprinkle it on his feet before dawn, and his tongue will twist. He will forget his stories. The people will turn from him. Baroka snatched the powder and crept back into the village. But what he didn't know was this: the whispering tree had heard his wicked plea, and the spirits who slept in its roots teared. That night, Uluma had a dream. A great tortoise with a crown of stars came to him and said, "Beware the shadow that follows without feet. Go before dawn to the sacred stone of the ancestors." Uluma rose before the first rooster crowed. He walked to the stone that sat at the village's edge, a place where spirits passed messages to the living. There, he poured libation and sang an old song. As his voice echoed, the wind changed, and the calabash of truth, which now hung in the palace, began to hum. The palace guard ran to the king, shouting, "The calabash has awakened." The king summoned Uluma. As Uluma entered, the calabash lifted into the air. It spun thrice and pointed to Chief Baroka's compound. The villagers gathered, led by the king himself. There, outside the gates, they saw it. Powder scattered like ash. Caught in the act, Baroka stumbled out, the whispering tree's leaves clinging to his robe, whispering his evil aloud. The people were silent. Even the birds stopped their song. The king raised his staff. "Chief Baroka, you have not only sought to harm a brother, but you have insulted the gods of truth and justice." Then a child, one of Uluma's listeners, steps forward. "My mother says those who dig pits for others often fall into them." The people murmured in agreement. The king declared, "Baroka shall no longer sit among the elders. Let him serve the village he scorned. Let him carry yams, fetch water, and learn humility, as Uluma once did." And so it was. Baroka, stripped of title, became a servant of the people. Some laughed, others pitied him. But Uluma, he approached Baroka and gave him water to drink. "Even the river forgives," he said. From that day, peace returned to Aroko. The whispering tree slept once more, and Uluma continued to tell his tales. Only now there were stories of forgiveness, of second chances, and of the power of truth. And the calabash of truth still hangs in the palace, quiet but watching, always watching. Seasons passed in Aroko and the land knew peace. Rain fell gently on the fields, the rivers flowed with song, and the children laughed in the shadows of the baobab trees. Uluma the Wise grew older, his beard silver like morning mist, but the stories never lost their fire. Chief Baroka, now simply called Baro, walked among the villagers, though many still whispered behind his back. He bore it with silence. He fetched water from the distant stream, helped mend broken fences and listened, really listened for the first time in his life. One Harmattan morning, as dusk called like spirits in the air, a stranger arrived in Aroko. He was cloaked in faded indigo robes and carried a drum carved with markings no one recognized. His name was Tunde, and his eyes held storms. He sought audience with King Ajenifuja, but not before visiting Uluma beneath the storytelling tree. "I have walked from beyond the black hills," Tunde said, "guided by dreams and the song of your calabash. Darkness tears in the east, a new king rises, one who bends spirit to his will." Uluma's heart trembled, not to fear, but to knowing. "The calabash has been quiet," he said, "but its silence is the deep breath before the call." Tunde placed his drum before him and struck a rhythm so ancient that even the ground vibrated in response. Uluma listened, and so did the spirits. That night, the calabash of truth glowed again. It showed visions not just of Aroko, but of distant lands, villages swallowed by shadow, rivers running backwards, and a masked figure seated on a throne of bones. The king summoned his council. "We must send envoys, gather knowledge and prepare," said King Ajenifuja. "But first, let us look within, for only a people in harmony can stand when storm comes." And so, Uluma began teaching not just stories, but the wisdom hidden within them. He gathered children, elders, even Baru, and formed the cycle of truth, a sacred group tasked with preserving balance in the village and beyond. Baru, humbled and learning, found himself at the center of this new path. Though many doubted him, he walked with quiet resolve, slowly gaining respect, not through title but through deeds. One evening, as Uluma sat watching the sunset, a young girl named Ifueko, bright-eyed and quick-witted, sat by his side. "Grandfather Uluma," she asked, "when you are gone, who will tell the stories?" Uluma smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You will, child. You and others like you. Stories are like seeds. You plant them in the hearts of the willing, and they grow into forests that shelter generations." She looked up at the stars, her eye wide. "Then I shall tell stories that make even the moon listen." Uluma chuckled, "Then let the world beware." And so, the village of Aroko stood, watchful, wise and waiting. The winds of change had begun to blow. The calabash had stirred, and the last drumbeat of the coming storm had sounded in the distance. But the cycle of truth was ready, or so they hoped. The storm came, not with thunder, but with silence. Villages vanished, rivers forgot their names, shadows walked in daylight. But in Aroko, the cycle of truth stood firm. Fueko, now grown, held the calabash aloft. It glowed with the light of 1,000 untold stories. Uluma, in his final breath, whispered, "Truth is not a weapon, it is a mirror." And with that, the enemy saw themselves and fled. Peace returned, the calabash slept, and the stories lived on.